In Conversation with Terry Shepard, award-winning broadcaster, narrator, and author. A deep dive into the writer's craft with the artists and support systems who create the stories we love.
Thanks, Lisa. Our guest is A.O. Wagner, a reclusive yet riveting voice in contemporary fiction, and the author of the electrifying trilogy, the Karma Kantata, with K and K, Kantata spelled Kantata. Wagner's writing fuses gripping suspense with deep philosophical and spiritual inquiry, weaving together themes of technology, society, and the unseen forces that shape our world. In the Karma Kantata, we follow Dan, an introverted computer genius whose life has already unraveled once as he investigates a cutting-edge gene analysis system that's begun to do something no one can explain, predicting the exact date people will die. As Dan unravels this chilling mystery, he also embarks on a journey of personal redemption, wrestling with questions of purpose, addiction, and the very fabric of reality. It's a pleasure to welcome A.O. Wagner to the conversation. It's nice to see you.
Thank you, Terry. It's a privilege to be here.
The Karma Kantata introduces a system that predicts death dates through gene analysis. Where did this idea come from?
Actually, for many years, I had the wish or the idea to make something in the intersection of hard science and pure logic on the one hand, and the spiritual sphere on the other, saying normally we regard those as very distinct and separate. And I've always had the idea that it would be interesting to merge the two, make a story in that intersection with, of course, the AI and the analysis, the computer, the database systems being the hardcore science part of the equation, and the karma and the prediction about the future, the spiritual part, the faith-based part being the other side. That really was the core motivation for my writing this book and for the idea.
Dan's character, to me, is complex and deeply introspective. Who inspired him? How did you build him?
Yeah, that's the old story that was actually inspired by my own story. The theme of the book one in the Karma Kantata series is alcoholism. And another motivation for writing it was also to share some of the insights that I had gotten from my own transition from being struggling with alcohol to being completely recovered. And that took some special steps, which I think that many people have some trouble accepting some of these steps. So I wanted to share those insights, and hopefully some readers somewhere will benefit from these insights. That was my motivation. And the story, in a very formalized way, it's actually my own story for a big part of it.
Sooner or later, our own autobiography sneaks into our fiction.
Yeah, that's true.
You do such a good job weaving high-tech suspense with spiritual themes. How do you strike a balance between those two ideas in a way that will be attractive to readers?
Part of it is intuition and guesswork, but I try to, from a layered point of view, to build up the plot and the interest from the reader, so that no matter how large amount of philosophical or spiritual interest they have, they will still get a good story and hopefully an entertaining time while reading the whole series, hopefully. On top of that, then I add my themes and my messages that I hope that I can share. I know they will not be picked up by every reader, but maybe somewhere there's a reader that said, I can use that in my own recovery process. And that is actually at the core of what I define as my own mission, to help sharing what helped me during the years.
Love the phrase spiritual mechanics, which you use in the series. How do you define that?
That's again the distinction between the natural sciences and the spiritual. In the old days, of course, the sciences were about the spiritual stuff, the theology, and so that's what grounded all the universities in our part of the world, was the study of God, basically, and the scriptures, the books. But they have always been metaphysical in a way that you didn't have to have any technical understanding of anything in actually to acquire faith. And I guess my idea is that the transcendent system, which I believe projects this whole universe that we're in and that we share, is also based on some sort of technology. It's just an alien, not like in the Ridley Scott Alien, a strange and unknown technology, but it has to run on some sort of platform. And in lack of better words, we can call it God or the transcendent or the spiritual. There is a system that makes this projection, has created everything, starting with in our physical universe, or the model we call the Big Bang. So I think the mechanics is, I can't help but thinking about Arthur C. Clarke, as he said, any sufficiently advanced technology will be indistinguishable from magic. What we think of as magic, or the transcendent, or the spiritual, or the religious, the faith, and everything that lies beyond our natural sciences and our logical way of explaining it, all that is also a sort of a technology. It has to be, but that's the background for that phrase.
A.O. Wagner is our guest. We're talking about his Karma Kantata trilogy. The Karma sequence is the most recent edition. How do you see technology's influence on our perception of reality?
Yeah, I think these years some changes are happening. We've always defined ourselves based on the tools we're using. It goes back to ancient man. But I think something dangerous is happening these years when we're in parallel, where the machines are becoming more and more human, like androids and AI, everything. And that's very obvious to everyone. But I think there's a parallel development where actually humans, that we are becoming more and more, and maybe like androids, we are, and especially in book number 2, that's also a theme of mine, where I discussed the subject of transhumanism and the dangers in thinking that you can experience anything, that you can sense anything in life without at least some sort of a functioning body and more or less working set of senses, that you think you can reflect on your existence without some sort of physical body to sense yourself and your surroundings. On a philosophical level, I think there's a dangerous development in that sphere.
Isaac Asimov overlaid all of his robot stories with laws of robotics, the most important being that a robot can't harm a human nor allow a human to be harmed. It doesn't seem like that's where artificial intelligence is taking us. Is that your feeling too?
I don't think that technology is a way forward. It makes things convenient. But the price we're paying in terms of work and estrangement to family and to friends, and really finding ourselves in some sort of a persona that we want to exhibit online, I think the price gets too big. And I use it in my third book, the term that technology is in opposition to biology. And I think that's a very cynical view, but I think there's a core of truth in that oversimplified statement, that we think as I also writes, that one of the 100 of possibilities in a given technology makes our life more comfortable. And that at the same time, we think that we are clever enough to navigate around the 99 potential dangerous usages of this specific technology. And I think in that whole concept lies great risk that at some point people will be really hurt. I think you see it already in young people having trouble with their online presence on social media, where they build up an image, an artificial persona of how they would like to present themselves. And then when they look in the mirror, you have the difference between the image, the persona, and what they know they are. And in that space, I think you have mental illness and dissatisfaction with life and suffering. So I think actually, maybe I'm too conservative, but I think maybe we should have stopped with the telephone and said, that's it.
Just make the cord a little bit longer so you can drag it from the kitchen to the bedroom when you need privacy.
Yeah, that would be a mobile phone.
Was it hard to make the transition from software developer to storyteller?
Yes, yes, it was. I think many writers has this experience changing from this mode, from the analytical and being deeply involved in some coding and some systems and some analysis, and then changing to this more associative layered approach of how you want to construct this universe where there are actually no rules, there are no platforms that limit your actions. You can come up with anything you want. That was pretty hard. And for many years, I actually tried to combine the two, saying, I was naive and said, I'll write in my free time and in weekends and holidays. And maybe I could even take a week off now and then to focus on writing. But I learned the hard way that it took at least a couple of days to change the mindset from one hat to another. And that's not enough if you want to be productive in a weekend. And if you spend a day or two changing from one mode to another. Actually, 2022, I took the consequence and quit my old job, which was very hard because I really enjoyed the job. And I just had to realize that based on what my idea of this mission, I would never be able to combine the two modes. So that was very tough for me to realize that. And then I simply had to make a simple prioritization and say, okay, what do you want the most? And this was it. And I've been happy with that choice, I must say.
What was the motivating moment that made you make the switch?
At one point, finally, I came to the conclusion that all my efforts to try to combine the both, that they were an illusion. And then I simply I talked to my boss and said that I need to do this. After a lot of trial and error, I've concluded that I can't do it in this. And he was very understanding. And he said, oh, okay, if that's what you want to do. And I've talked about this for many years. So it didn't come as a shock to him or my colleagues. So that in that way, I was very fortunate that it was not a hard break. And I felt very safe making the transition.
Your protagonist has a rough, often painful journey. And you say this was a very personal story for you as well. Was it hard to go back and relive some of those moments in your own journey as you wrote this book?
Yes and no. I think it wasn't hard on an emotional level because part of the treatment that I received from my disease, from my alcoholism, that totally cured me. And it's been 12 years this August since I last touched alcohol. It's a kind of the Jubilee anniversary. And I've never looked back. And talking about it, which I do, of course, very detailed in my books, has never bothered me at all because that's part of who I am, who I was, and I've changed. So in that sense, it wasn't hard to confront again. What was hard was to remember all the details of the whole ordeal and the suffering and all the attempts to escape the addiction. And so I wanted to portray pretty much everything of it, all that I could in the book. So remembering everything, all the situations and all the horror of it. And it didn't hurt, but I really took some extra time to make sure that the image that I paint is as accurate.
Our special guest is A.O. Wagner. His trio is the Karma Kantata. You and I share a commonality. We both enjoy the reclusive life, but part of writing a book is you got to go out there and promote it. How do you manage the public side of A.O. Wagner?
Yeah, that's actually just as much work as writing the novels. But for a long time, I tried using Amazon ads and giveaways on sites like Goodreads, and it all worked extremely well, but they only have limited effects. Then it fades out. And then I've also used the sites you probably know that as well, written word media, which I was still am very satisfied. And in that universe, they have a lot of seminars and articles to read. And then that's how I found the idea to change the covers of my book to get a professional. And they also talked about what the options were for finding some PR bureaus. And it was through a seminar, the Written Word Media, that I found the PR by the book that is now helping me very professionally and profoundly to share the knowledge.
Do you see yourself exploring similar themes in future books? Do you have more stories to tell?
Oh, yeah, I have actually, to put it a little cynically, I only have one story to tell, and that's the story of this transcendent insight that then also gets closer and closer over the trilogy. I have a mission to spread this not very original message. There's nothing new. I just hope that I can supply a platform for sharing it to some new listeners or readers about this transcendent insight. As long as I think the books are a good platform, a good carrier for that sentiment.
One dimension of the story is the technology that can tell us the exact date when our life will end. If that were available, is that something you would want to know?
No, I can say that. And it's funny because some of the criticism of the first book, the Karma Kantata, the Karma sequence, was that some readers had hoped that it would be a listing presentation of how people would react differently with that knowledge about their demise. And I have to comment, I think, and it's a good comment, and I'm sad if some were disappointed by it not being that kind of book. But in another more technical understanding, I also have to say that most of us, from a statistical point of view, we shouldn't be surprised by the knowledge that we are going to die someday. And within the ballpark of a decade or two, we have a fairly good expectation of when it will happen based on our lifestyle and health and statistics and the whole situation, diseases. And maybe if you're inclined to that, you can maybe even make some, as the people in the book, some genetic analysis and see what kind of diseases and illnesses are you disposed of and prevent it. But most of us will, if we ask ourselves sincerely, we will have a pretty good idea of at least how far we can expect to live. We can't prepare for the brick in the head tomorrow, but we know that we're not going to be 200 years old or 500 or 1,000. There are tables that you can look into, and then if you want to do something in your life, you better get started now because it's the time is limited.
What do your readers say that they like best about your writing?
I think from the handful of reviews that I've had so far on Amazon, I think some of it is the theme about the alcoholism and the sickness and the healing process that some readers have found useful. And that's what I want to share.
What do you recommend as a good first step for someone who realizes that they have lost control with alcohol?
Realizing that is a giant step in itself. So coming to that conclusion is obviously very, very an enormous step. And I think I've tried many times to escape the addiction on sheer willpower and saying, yeah, now I managed to have breaks that lasted weeks and even months sometime. Finally, you break like a straw in the wind because carrying that burden and it takes so much energy. And then at one point, you just break and say a single drop won't hurt, but it does. So my recommendation would be some professional people's help. Follow the Minnesota treatment. For example, in the AA community, Alcoholics Anonymous, accept that you as an alcoholic will never find a moderate level of alcohol consumption. The only way to escape is to 100%. A spiritual understanding or insight is invaluable in my experience. And unfortunately, I think in our modern day and time, people have reluctance that there is a transcendent power, that there is something supernatural outside of our known cosmos and a higher power that they can rely on, both for meaning and for help and for guidance.
What do you hope that readers in general will take away from their encounter with the Karma Kantata?
First of all, I hope they have a good experience reading the books. But my main mission that I will use all my time and energy on is to spread the idea of supernatural being, a transcendent entity that creates this projection that we conceive as a physical universe. The suffering as a base condition, which is also one of my main themes, that as Buddha says, life is suffering. And once you accept that as a base condition, and not like an injustice to your person. Once you realize that the suffering is manifest, it's the base condition of life, being a biological process where you spend a lot of energy to keep your own structure together, and you pay an enormous price for that. Having this awareness as a starting point and trying to keep the awareness of the transcendent energy in everything you do will give meaning to and purpose and energy to everything you do in life.
Karma Kantata, a fascinating intersection between science and spirituality, written by our special guest, A.O. Wagner. How would you like people to interact with you?
I have a Facebook presence and an Instagram presence. Then, of course, I have also my Goodreads page. I've considered having also like a homepage, but I've not yet decided if I'm going that way, because mainly I think I'm not sure that I would have enough content on a daily or weekly basis to add content to my newsletter or all the traditional ways. So it would be sad that if people signed up for a newsletter and then once every 6 months they get everything is fine here, how are you? And I think that's a bit too thin a reason.
The biggest challenge that all of us who take up the keyboard to write face is how to promote it. A.O. Wagner, thanks so much for the conversation.
Thank you, Terry. I really enjoyed it. It's been a privilege.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard is a copyrighted presentation. All rights reserved. I'm Lisa Davis. Join Terry Shepard next time in Conversation.